Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you Bake to the Future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Joel.
And today we're going Bake to the Future with Erin Sharp.
She's the Group Vice President of Manufacturing at the Kroger Company, and she's also the ABA Board Chair from 2018 and 2020. And for this show, we did something a little bit different.
Yes, for this show, we handed the mic over.
He took it from our cold hands, our clutches.
So Robb MacKie, who is this ABA CEO and president, he was interviewed last show, and for this episode, we had him take the reins, take the mic, and he talked to Erin Sharp. And today we're going to hear their conversation. It was super interesting. So, Katie, tell me a little bit about Kroger.
They're headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they're one of the world's largest food retailers with thousands of supermarkets and multi-department stores. They're in 35 states and D.C. They have 35 food production plants, including several baking facilities. So that's why, they're a member. And they have billions and billions of dollars in sales, with $121 billion in fiscal year 2018. And then leading their group, the Group Vice President for Manufacturing at the company is Erin Sharp. And let me tell you, she is a powerhouse. So I know that you've done a little research on her too. So tell me a little bit.
Yeah, so Erin is responsible for the company's manufacturing plants, as well as sourcing and planning for all Kroger corporate brands grocery products.
So like Simple Truth Organic.
They includes a lot of bakery items.
Yes, for sure. And she joined the company after doing many things with like food and logistics for other companies. And then she moved to the central region, and she leads manufacturing and logistics operations for their U.S. fresh bakery division. And she also lives in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is, of course, the headquarters. And she's, we'll talk a little, you'll hear us talk a little bit, or Rob talk a little bit about it. She's just done some really great work with LGBTQ issues, with workforce development issues, and just diversity and inclusion, and what that means to Kroger and to her personally, I think is just really compelling.
And so Erin talks about how Kroger develops its workforce and their recent focus on employing veterans, and her advice for other companies who are looking into these initiatives. And as Katie was saying, she is all about putting company values at the forefront, especially about diversity and inclusion, and how they do that with their veterans employment programs. And ABA is also a leader in working with veterans and making sure that baking companies are employing veterans and really utilizing their skills that they can bring to the workforce.
And what we talk a lot about a very specific employee within Kroger that has this amazing story. And we also talk about some other issues, such as the recent sugar shortage that impacted Kroger, and how ABA helped quickly solve that supply issue, and also some labeling issues that saved Kroger a lot of money, that ABA worked very closely with the entire industry on. It's a really interesting conversation, so let's turn it over to Rob and see how he did.
Good morning, Erin. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
So we're going to start off easy, and I know I sort of selected this question, but so what's your favorite baked good?
Well, it's a toss-up. It's between a bagel and an English muffin, because I kind of alternate. But I'd probably have to say English muffin.
Okay.
It's sourdough English muffin.
The sourdough English muffin. Okay, great. So tell me, how did you get into baking? I mean, you've got a great story, and I think it's really important that people understand kind of your path to where you are today.
Well, my whole career post grad school has really been in food manufacturing and the food business. And my intro to kind of grains and baking started with Frito years ago, and their idea of baking, of course, includes frying. So, but from there, just kind of various organizations within the CPG world, I landed at Sara Lee and was focused on the baking industry there.
I think that's where I met you originally.
It was at an ABA event.
Right.
And so really that was my love of baking. And when I left Sara Lee and joined Kroger, Kroger has, of course, many categories within our manufacturing, kind of portfolio of plants. But I focused on baking because of my experience at Sara Lee and joined ABA and have been an advocate and a participant for a long time.
That's great. Now, Kroger is really known. I remember the first time I went to Kroger, to the Columbus Bakery, John Wagner, I felt like I was on a recruiting tour, in college. But Kroger has always been part of the culture, sort of developing its talent. And I think you do it, the company does it about as good as anybody in the country. But talk a little bit about, we've had an emphasis lately on focusing on veterans. Tell me a little bit about kind of your approach, the Kroger approach to attracting veterans.
We really have loved interacting with veterans over the last several decades, but more focused in the last 10 years. And both at recruiting into our hourly ranks with our various plants, but also in leadership positions. And obviously the recruiting is a little different for both groups of associates. But on the leadership side, we really look at, what transitional needs that our veterans are going to need, different than our leaders coming from other industries and similar roles. And so trying to make sure that we provide those transition opportunities and kind of training, if you will, to set them up for the most likelihood of success.
You shared with me, you hired somebody, just a very, very impressive person, and I hope I have the opportunity to meet her one day. The woman that's running your La Habra plant. I thought you made some really good points, Erin, about how important it was for Kroger to come up with a transition plan to make sure that she was positioned for success at Kroger.
Sure. Her name is Julia Benitez, and she is leading our La Habra bakery, as you said. When I first met Julia, it was really over a phone call. One of our associates was at one of the USO recruiting events and called me and said, "You got to meet this young woman, and she's outstanding." And so I got on a call with her, and it was supposed to be a 15-minute call, turned into about a 2-hour call.
Wow.
And about 15 minutes in, I started recruiting. And it was clear to me that she had leadership that would be very difficult to teach anybody. When she'd led a battalion on the front lines of Afghanistan. And so for us, it was for me particularly, it was wow. That's the kind of leadership you can't teach people, but I can teach someone how to run a plant. And so we focused her transition on, all of the aspects of taking the leadership that she had learned in the military. She was in the Marine Corps, and how do we transition that to running, 150 to 250 member manufacturing plant. So she was in almost a year-long training plan where she worked with various of our site leaders, both in baking and outside of baking, to learn the various aspects of leading a plant.
Yeah, and you talked about, talking to Julia about, the transition process. Do you have any advice for other bakers who are working with veterans in terms of what you need to do to make sure that they're going to be successful?
I think just, each case is going to be unique. So you really need to understand the individual and, what their skills and experiences have been in the military, and then, where are the parallels to what you need from them to be successful in whatever leadership role you have in mind for them, whether it's leading a plant or running a department within a plant. Or even outside of manufacturing. It could be in sales and marketing. It could be, R&D, depending on their background. And being patient. I think the other thing is that those kinds of transitions from a military life to a business, life is not an easy transition for many, depending on how long they've been in the service. So being patient and really creating an environment where they can thrive is the best advice I'd have.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the relationship and the partnership that the industry has developed with the USO Pathfinders. And I shared this story, when my dad, after 22 years in the Army, transitioned out in 1980, not the best time from the economy perspective. Right. The services, they just weren't there. And so now to fast forward to today and the dedication, that the USO and then now the industry being able to sort of plug in, is just really important for both sides. And so I think it's something that we as a country owe our veterans, but it's nice to just see the evolution and the fact that Kroger has really embraced that, and I think now the industry is embracing that, so that's really good.
Yeah,
so.
We're proud of our relationship with the USO and also our efforts not only in manufacturing but on the retail side of creating paths for our veterans to transition back.
So I bet you had, just to put it out there, Erin, we talked about this a number of times. I mean, the baking industry is, a pretty male-heavy industry, but I'm just curious, kind of any advice that you might have had for Julia and other women leaders that are up and coming, in terms of how to be successful, in this industry.
Well, with Julia, it's hard for me to give anyone advice when you're one of the first women to lead a battalion on the front lines of Afghanistan. Right. I think she had all the gumption she needed to have to be successful in our world.
I'm sure.
But really just to be herself and not pretend she knew things she didn't, because she hadn't grown up in manufacturing, hadn't grown up in baking. Rely on the subject matter experts within her plant, because what she was bringing was leadership, and that's really my advice to her, because when I was young in my career, I ended up in an operations role coming out of a financial role, and I didn't know the ins and outs of running a production line like my associates did, and even some of my team leaders did. So I learned early on, you don't pretend to know something you don't know, and rely on the people who do.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, having had the opportunity to walk plant floors with you a couple of times, I think you've mastered that, to be honest.
I've learned a lot.
The admiration and
good
respect.
Teachers.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the other things that Kroger is really known for is diversity in the workforce, and I know you represented Kroger recently in Cincinnati for the Human Rights Commission. Tell me about kind of the Kroger philosophy around diversity, and how has that added value to the company?
Well, diversity and inclusion is one of our core values, and certainly being recognized by the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, for a perfect score of 100 on their index, equality index, for the second year in a row was really humbling and something we were very proud of. And as I said, in accepting the award, was one of the main reasons that my wife Gloria and I decided to join Kroger 8.5 years ago, and we also were named the Cincinnati's Company of the Year, so that again was something we were very proud of. So we believe that diversity is not only is it a core value, but it's also a kind of from a recruiting standpoint, it's the reason a lot of folks, make a career at Kroger and stay at Kroger, because you're only as strong as how you represent your customer base, and our customer base is as diverse as it could be, and knowing that we serve customers in almost the entire country, and being able to represent our customers with our associates is very, very important to us.
I think one of the things I've really enjoyed, Erin, thank you for that, by the way. One of the things I've really enjoyed, Erin, is, with you as chair, is you really are just representing those Kroger values, which is so important. One of the other things I think that you brought this kind of unique is, a foot on, you work for a major retailer, very successful retailer in the country, but you also have the manufacturing background. What is your advice, in terms of sort of pairing those up, in terms of how does this category sort of get out in front, get on its toes again, leaning in front of some of the consumers that you talked about?
Well, certainly, we've talked about the effect of social media and all of the various advocacy groups that are out there, and some science-based, some think they're science-based, and really what the various whether they're agricultural industries or not are facing from a kind of opinion-based groups. And as a retailer, we have to serve all groups. We have to serve all and sell all of the products and unique kind of I won't say run of the mill, but certainly idea du jour when it comes to a diet or nutritional fad. So for us as the manufacturing arm, we can't jump in to something unless it makes a lot of sense, unless it's mainstream or we think it's going to be around for a while. So we tend to stick to what I think of are the long-term nutrition-based, science-based categories of the past and the future. So, I as a manufacturing leader, our role is to wade through all of that and make sure we're following, what we believe are the major consumer trends.
Sure. I mean, you have to put together a whole business plan, to know where to make those plays and maybe where to, be on the leading front, or maybe to sit back, or maybe just to avoid altogether.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that we won't sell those niche products or bleeding edge products, but we're probably not going to get into it from a self-manufacturing.
Right. Well, that's great. So thinking about, let me ask you this. How long have you been involved with ABA? I know you were at Sara Lee when I first met you. How long have you been involved with ABA?
That would be probably about 13 years, 14 years, yeah.
Time flies, right?
Time flies when you're having fun.
So you've been the chair for the last 2 years. And kind of what are some of your takeaways? You've sort of seen ABA operate up close. I mean, you've been involved, obviously, in the executive committee, for a number of years. What have been some of the accomplishments that you really sort of stand out for you over the last 2 years?
One of the things that I think ABA does better than any industry group, and as a member of the Kroger executive team, we see a lot of the various industry groups operate, and we participate with many and most of them with various of our execs. But what I think ABA does better than anybody is our work on policy and our work here in Washington and really representing the baking industry and even the food manufacturing industry at large, because there's a lot of work that we've done this past year on nutritional guidelines and nutritional labeling that in fact supports and benefits the broader food categories, not just the baking industry. So I would put ABA's work and a very small staff too up at the top of the impact list.
Well, that's very kind, Erin. I mean, you know how focused we are at the team level, and then clearly with the guidance of the executive committee and the board, we want to make sure that we're delivering results. But it's very kind of you to say that. Talk to a little bit about the labeling, because that seems to be something we have been waist deep in for years and years. How has that benefited the industry and maybe even Kroger from a financial perspective or an operational efficiency perspective?
Well, even just most recently, the work that the team did to get the 6-month extension on being able to essentially run out packaging. We were positioned very well. We've got a very dedicated team working with our suppliers and our own self-manufacturing to get all the work done, to get the labeling changes done that were that met the new requirements. But timing that is incredibly difficult when you have over 20,000 SKUs. And so what it allowed us to do is to efficiently and effectively run out packaging and not waste from a sustainability standpoint and a financial standpoint. I would say probably well in excess of $100,000 worth of packaging that we were able to utilize and run out. And so we're still in market with many of the new packaging because we were able to do a soft conversion versus a hard conversion, and that, like I said, saved us a lot of money.
Right. Well, I think that's the benefit, because ABA really does represent the entire supply chain. So that when we have, whether it's a labeling issue, and we've done this historically, where we have all the major packaging suppliers and the packaging equipment companies are members of ABA, so that we can bring the entire supply chain together and say, so there's obviously sort of the broader conceptual policy angles of this, but then, and I think this is, just to be immodest, I think where ABA is really successful is we bring the practical implications to it.
Exactly.
So what's the capacity, for bread bags and cardboard stock? What is,
right.
Where are the companies going to fall in? Large companies and small companies. And I think, personally, I think that's very effective when we're sitting down across the table from FDA or USDA. And then I think the point that you made about sustainable packaging.
Right.
Nobody wants to see this stuff in a landfill.
Well, and even going back to when the original guidelines were set and the original deadlines, we got that original extension of, I think it was almost 2 years
Right.
to the 2020 deadline, and that allowed us to essentially stage gate all the changes we had to make. And there were less totally incremental changes. So in other words, we were able to make the changes when we normally touch packaging for so
Right.
many more of our SKUs, which means the cost of that conversion was minimized,
Right,
and
right.
that all gets passed on to the end consumer, no matter who we think we're kidding. I mean, it all gets passed on to the end
Sure.
consumer. So by sharing those facts with the FDA, we were able to, through advocacy work, like coming out of ABA and others, to get that deadline extended so we could minimize the overall impact of the changes.
That's great. And I think at one point we calculated 4 or 5 different within like that 2-year period.
Right.
And that just would have been first of all, impossible to achieve.
Right.
And B, the cost and the waste of that would have been enormous.
Yeah, and we looked at just even the number of SKUs between our own manufacturing and our suppliers. You have a limited number of packaging converters, and everything was going to get funneled through those packaging converters, over that originally short amount of time. And we just didn't think it was even physically possible to get done. So by being able to go in and in the right way, share that information with the FDA, I think was really what helped us get that original extension.
Right.
And it wasn't that we were not supporting the changes, it was really around the practicality of getting it done.
Sure. So we've, certainly in the last, 3 or 4 months, we're starting to hear about increased commodity volatility, and it's been relatively, stable. Certainly much better than it was in like 08, 09. We just saw these huge spikes in commodity prices. The most recent example is on the sugar because of the horrible flooding that's gone on. Can you talk a little bit about, ABA's work and how that benefited your company and the industry?
Absolutely. We buy a lot of sugar.
Right.
Obviously, not only for our baking plants, but our other plants, and then our retail sugar that our customers, buy and enjoy to take home. So, sugar has a huge impact on our overall economics. And, when the beet crops were in trouble and we looked at the outlook for domestic sugar, it was a scary proposition. And so, we immediately, put a team together and we're looking at what was our strategy, what did we need to do to ensure, one, we could satisfy our customers' needs, and two, minimize the economic impact. And with the work that ABA was doing with the Department of Ag and the ability to open up the basically the supply out of Mexico.
Right.
When you sent out the note saying we were successful and we've got this relief coming, I immediately had our team get in touch with ABA, and the staff was very responsive. Basically walked our team through what it meant. What was the availability, how it would play out in the market, so to speak. And so our team was able to essentially take that information and put that together and create a strategy that was a much better strategy in the end.
Right. So what do you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, would you say that, the information and then that insight piece in terms of how all this worked enabled you to make, sound business decisions for your company.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it wasn't a total solution, but it became part of the strategy that, we laid out to make sure that we were going to have coverage for our needs, both, in our baking plants and our other plants, as well as our retail needs. So.
Well, I have to be very honest with you. Normally the wheels of government around here take, at a glacial pace. We were very pleasantly surprised that within 48 hours of our request, that they came right back and said yes. And my hope is that if we need to do that again, that they will be equally as quick. So
yeah, I think we realized that the relief we did get wasn't probably everything we need. Right. When you look at some of the industries, I know ice cream is another big industry that was affected. Right. So
that's great. So you've had a very busy couple of years. So in addition to your day job, we've done international meetings. We've done, I think under your leadership, we've met more with our international partners, because just even baking, people don't think of baking as being a global industry, and the challenges are the same. So we have thrown a lot at you in the last 2 years. Why did you do it?
I'm not sure.
No. There's an honest answer, right? It was Tim Kevel, wasn't it?
It was Tim Kevel speaking in my ear as a past chair from the Kroger Co. No, I think it was an opportunity to really have an impact on an industry that I love, and really take what our team was working on back at Kroger Manufacturing, and hopefully help in some way, lead the work that we're doing to better not only the baking industry, but I think really the food industry at large. And from a personal standpoint, being able to be the first woman chair was something that meant something to me as a woman leader in manufacturing. When you talked before about some of the challenges. That's been an interesting career path for me over the last almost 40 years. Right. And this, to be able to do this towards the end of my career, has been very fulfilling. That's
great, Erin. And it's great that we've been able to sort of break that glass ceiling, and I know you're particularly proud. We have other folks that are following very closely on your heels. Absolutely. And so we're very excited about, how the board is diversified, and that we're able to hold up, very successful women leaders in this industry, and that's terrific. I would say personally, it has been an absolute joy and a privilege to get to know you and Gloria, spend a lot of time with you, and both in business and then in the personal side as well. It has just been an absolute joy having you as our chair, and I'm very excited for what the legacy that you're leaving. And I know this is very important to you. I think you're leaving ABA in a much stronger position to be successful for the future. I know that's really important. I'll give you the closing word, but thank you again for your incredible leadership and inspirational leadership for ABA.
Thanks, Rob, and I've enjoyed all of it, and I look forward to being the past chair coming
as everybody knows
post convention, and Brad will do an outstanding job, and I'll be cheering him on from the chair beside him, and right. for at least a couple more years.
That's great, Erin. Thank you very much for joining us today.
I think Rob did a pretty swell job.
I have to agree. Yeah, we really learned a lot, and
I think, just listening to that, it just reminds me, and it just makes me feel great about the lasting impact that Erin's tenure as ABA chair will have, over these past few years, but of course, many years into the future. I think that she was really at a helm of the industry and of the association during an interesting time. So I think that she did a great job, and I'm glad that we were able to sit down with her.
Yeah, and we just want to let you listeners know that if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate us wherever you're listening. Write us a review and share it with a friend. Share it with
your friends.
Yeah, we really want to spread the word, and most importantly, keep you all informed about the latest innovative trends and what's going on in the baking industry.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Althen. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.